Just checking. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you so much. For POIs, I would prefer either on chat or like turning on your camera and showing a piece of paper, but preferably chat would be, I think, easier to do. I would definitely take a POI, so that's not going to be big of an issue. So starting in three, two, one. Panel, even before going into the entire debate, I think like certain few clarifications needs to be here as facts, just so that it becomes easier to debate. First of all, the contract that currently Messi has runs out last like next year, eventually, to the point that at that specific point, if he wants to leave, he would be like a free agent. Any team can like have a personal like individual contract with him, and he would be able to play for that club. So which is like a quite an important thing. I would explain why is that. And second of all, another thing is like Messi has never played for any other club to this extent. Like he was picked up from like a very youth stage to the point that he was being like he has risen through the ranks of the Barcelona to the point that he has been considered to be a legend in that specific thing. Why we are claiming this specific thing? The very idea of like him trying to leave at this specific point seems to be like is something that is included in his contract of like he can consider leaving like at like 1 year before that, but the very decision that he is most likely going to take in this specific situation is quite detrimental to his own image. Given that we are discussing from the perspective of like Messi, we would discuss from the image issues that he is going to have, and also the future repercussions that he would have if he decides to leave Barcelona at this specific point is going to be the bigger discussion for this debate. Essentially, why do we think on a first level this is going to be very important sort of like image related issue? The very fact that we have seen Messi has this like a very bad tendency or like very bad track record of like claiming his retirement in very problematic situations in his club, in his teams. He has like tried to announce a retirement twice in Argentina after the team actually went through like very bad losses, which is already sort of like a very problematic image that he already has. That in situations where the team is in crisis, there is a possibility of like he like randomly tries to like retire or tries to like leave the club. In that specific situation, what we see that the very impulsive nature or the impulsive image that he has is a very important issue that is going to like complicate the way that he is going to signal about his legacy. The info side mentions that he has continued to like contribute towards the club and has won a lot of championships, but the very fact that the club is in most likely in the worst sort of like situation to the point that it's having certain performance issues, like it lost like 8-2 in the last Champions League match, but essentially means the team is in a crisis. But at that specific point in time, even if after winning 33 trophies for the team, if he decides to leave, that is going to create the most obvious signaling effect to the people or the fans that he currently has, and the fans that he considers like that consider him to be the greatest of all time are going to consider that he was only here only when he had like Xavi, Iniesta, and other sort of like good quality players were supporting him. The very fact that he is going to create that specific situation is most likely is not going to be a very good image for him. The very fact that he has already tried to do this for Argentina already creates a precedence, and when he also tries to renege on the fact that yes, he is like unwilling to unwilling to support Barcelona at this specific point in time is more likely a significant problem in that specific situation. Yes, before going on, OSPY.
Clarify, by specific point in time, you're therefore okay with him leaving Barcelona after his contract expires. Why run this soft case? How is it in line with the motion?
Like, this is not necessarily like a soft case. We are trying to identify that if he wants to like venture out into different situations, he's like more willing to opt for that. But like we are also like if you're trying to push us towards like also agreeing to the fact that he's going to retire for Barcelona, we are also going to discuss that because that is also most likely something that you want us to do. But even in situation like if he wants to run through the like contract and like leave next year, we are fine with that. But we are more likely also willing to accept that yes, Messi would like retire continuing in Barcelona. The reason that we have both of these options is essentially because like Messi can choose like whichever option that he has, but the very fact that he's willing to do this willing to take this specific decision at the worst point in time for Barcelona is a very unique problem that we are identifying in the decision that Messi has at this point in time. The very fact that the team is underperforming most likely means that yes, the players are not necessarily playing well, or like there are like weaker or sort of like younger players who are not contributing in this specific situation. If he continues to like play for the club and actually helps the club to rebuild, is essentially going to help him to essentially first of all put a specific like signaling to himself and also towards like the entire audience, is that he is most likely capable of like ensuring that he's an individual player, but he's also a person who is capable of like significantly contributing in like changing the way the team operates. We essentially think this is where like the uniqueness of like team's contribution in a person's legacy or like a player's legacy becomes a very important factor. That even if you are a very individually like talented person, the very fact that your team, the management, the way that you are facilitated, or the other players are contributing in like developing your legacy is also something that we cannot absolutely like disregard in that specific situation. The very fact that Messi is willing to forego all of these things and consider that he has won a lot of championships for the club and he can move on without necessarily thinking about like what happens to this club after a certain situation is going to be significantly problematic in this situation. We have seen other players like willingly like venturing out into like going for other competitions or like other challenges, like for example of like Cristiano Ronaldo, but the very fact that he's willing to abandon this club at this specific point in time is significantly problematic at this point in time. In that specific nuance, we identify if he's willing to abandon the club at this point in time, it also creates a longer run implication in the way that Messi is most likely going to like be remembered and also would most likely be attached to the community of footballing itself. The very fact that he's considered to be very impulsive decision maker is most likely the worst possible situation that can happen if he like wants to have a like a football related career after he retires. If he wants to be manager or like a mentor or even have a like youth academy at the future point in time, most likely having this impulsive behavior is not going to make it significantly beneficial, that he is an individual who can run himself but most likely has zero capability of like running anyone else. The signaling issue that we have in this specific thing is also most likely going to be a problematic thing. The other ideas of like the nuances of Messi not necessarily not necessarily be willing to like agree with certain changes that is happening to the club or the way that the club has like built itself around Messi also essentially means like Messi deciding to leave at this specific point in time means that he is absolutely oblivious of the sacrifices and the contributions that this specific club from management to the team has done to this point in time, and that is essentially what we also identify to be very problematic thing for Messi. We think that Messi is most likely hurt because the team is not performing, but the very fact that he is going to take a very impulsive decision at this point in time is a very problematic thing for him to do for the future perpetuity of his career, and that is essentially why we think that he should consider this thing in a much more like proper manner and take a decision, but not necessarily like would be the best that he does not leave Barcelona and retires there because this is the club that loves him the most. I think that's why we're proud to propose. Thank you.
I thank that speaker for that fine speech. I'd just like to note that please try not to extend beyond 7 minutes and 20 seconds. I also encourage the panel to not take notes beyond this point in time. With that being said, I'd now like to invite the leader of opposition. Here.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, I would prefer POIs in the chat if that's possible. We think that it is fair of Messi to make the difficult choice to leave a club that he has built out because that club has strayed away from his vision of what a club should be and also what is best for his own growth. First clarification I want to make is that this debate is an actor debate. This means that the OG's entire last 1.5 minutes about the moral good of you leaving Barcelona is not a concern. It's about whether you as Messi would choose to do so. Therefore, what my team will look at is how it is good for Messi as number one, a celebrity, and number two, as an athlete. Next clarification. We reject this soft case from OG that they would be not okay with him leaving now, but they're okay with him leaving at the expiry of his contract in a matter of months. We think that both paradigms fall under the purview of opposition actually, and government must defend him staying on indefinitely. To use a parallel example, if the motion was this house would then Zeus, right? It is not fair for you to say you would then Zeus now, but then you're okay with it later on, right? When all the animals die. That's just a completely soft prop case that doesn't actually answer the motion. But in return, we also play fair. We are okay with Messi leaving right now, right? Even if the contract and the penalty clause contained within is still active. We will defend that as well. So then moving on to my case proper. There are two big points that I want to deal with. The first looks at him as a public figure. The second looks at him as an athlete. So first, why is this better for Messi's reputation as a public figure? We recognize that regardless of whether he leaves or not, he's going to have star power, right? So he is not going to lose out from leaving Barcelona. Right now, he has such a vast amount of endorsements. Right now, his name, regardless of the team he comes from, is a household name. This is the name that the young football players look up to and revere. So that is not going to be hurt at all. So therefore, responding to this idea that he therefore has an impulsive image because he asked to leave, we don't think so. Because this assumes, right, that it's a hasty choice on his part, but we disagree. Rather, what we see Messi doing right now is that he's actively seeking and negotiating with clubs over his buyout clause. Therefore, he's planning the mechanics of his exit, whether right now or later on. It's just trying to see, right, what is logistically the most feasible way for him to get out of Barcelona. Second, the OG is concerned whether he would therefore seem like a team player. We think it's quite obvious if he was a team player if he has spent his entire career to the age of 30 plus in Barcelona, right? And we also think that often it's very common for star players to move from football club to football club, something OG itself sees. Therefore, his loyalty for staying so long is already admirable and won't be eroded by him finally deciding to move on. Lastly, it is impossible to be a team player if your own team will not work with you. Right now, Messi is often engulfed with disagreements with his coach as to what the direction of the club, what the strategy should be like. And therefore, that makes it difficult for him to be put in play in a way that he thinks best benefits his team. Next, what do we think is therefore going to happen to his standing? We think that right now in Barcelona, in the club itself, he's increasingly devalued by his coach, right? And we think that is a problem. Why? Because right now his selling card is that he's the greatest player of all time in Barcelona. He is the person that brought the club from rags to riches. What happens to the reputation once you go from rags to riches to rags again? He is therefore seen as no different from any other player that didn't do anything very different for the club. He therefore has no lasting legacy for the club or for anybody else to remember him by. And that therefore erodes everything he has done for his own standing over the years. It is therefore better for him to break away and forge his own future instead of being seen as the person that also brought down the club. People's memories are short-lived, and therefore they'll remember him based on what happened most recently, and if that is the falling apart or decline of the club, that is why it's remembered for, not the victories in the past. But next, what happens with standing outside? We think that should he stay in Barcelona, what people see is his fall from greatness, Barcelona's increasing number of defeats. But if he leaves, what they see is a lateral shift. And we think a lateral shift is better for his reputation because he wouldn't be held to the same standing as when he was the golden boy of Barcelona. Also because shifting clubs and the changing fortunes that come with it is often seen as normal for a football player that gets accustomed to different styles of play and different ways of team management. Moreover, given the increasing politics and polarization within the club itself, right, we think that if he stays in Barcelona, his standing is dead in the water anyway. Why? Because if he is a big shot in the club right now, if he's the famous player and the golden boy, he is therefore the one that people are going to try and manipulate in their political games. He is the one that different players or factions in the club are trying to get on their side. Therefore, no matter what he does within the club, everything will look upon badly, but another side that thinks that it's not for their side within Barcelona. So it's better for him to break away from it. On then to my next point, on what is best for him as an athlete. Recognize that Messi, currently in his 30s, has only a few more years of play. He's still good, but he will find that his physical limitations will mean that he eventually has to retire. So what will allow him to make the most of his remaining few years of his sporting career? The best case, right, on our side is if he should leave the club right now and goes on winning more trophies outside. This therefore proves that on his own merit, regardless of what club he is tethered to, he will still do well. And we think that is actually very possible. Why? Because even as his bodily strength declines as he ages, right, he has increased experience and tactical knowledge as a senior player. And that is something that will allow him to go on doing well in whichever new club he goes to. But I'm going to bite the bullet and deal with my worst case as well. So let's assume, right, that Messi doesn't do as well. Why is that still okay? Before I go into it, are there any POIs from Gov Bench? Closing Gov? If not, I will carry on. So let's deal with the worst case. Say he moves to a different club and he doesn't achieve that same dizzying height of victory as he does in Barcelona. Why is that something that we think is perfectly fine? Firstly, if he already has 33 trophies, I think that the difference between 33 and 37 is honestly not going to be something that defines him as a player, simply because comparatively, how many other players can hold themselves up to that superlative standard anyway? So he is still far superior to many other players in the modern history of football. But secondly, the unhappiness in the present club means that it is not worth staying, even if Barcelona can bring him even more trophies than before. Why? Because football is ultimately a team sport, and most people that choose to devote their entire lives to professional football has some degree of love for the sport, right? And we just don't think that it's a good idea for him to stay in a club that would no longer make him feel as satisfied or happy as an athlete and as a sports person. This is especially the case if we go with a very fair assumption that Messi is somebody who values team loyalty, therefore being one of the few players to stay in a club for all of his career. Therefore, he would not want to stay in a club that is no longer true to him or no longer supportive of what he does. We don't think that he would find it worth it in return for a few extra trophies or a few other accolades. Next, we also think, right, that if he moves to a new club that doesn't have the same reputation as Barcelona or the same level of victory as Barcelona has enjoyed in previous years, this means that as long as he brings that new club to a better standard than they were before he came in, that is a triumph for the new club, and he's seen as value adding to that club and bringing them to greater heights. Therefore, the bar for him to hit to be recognized as a good player in that club, right, is actually lower than within Barcelona. We therefore think that if he goes to a good club, he's going to do really well there and still be prized as a member of a star club. But if he goes to a weaker club, he'll be seen as a stronghold there. It will bring them towards greater improvement, and therefore I'm extremely proud to.
I thank that speaker for their fine speech and would now like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Hi, I'll just take 15 seconds if you don't mind. God, I hate sports motions. Okay, wait, hold on. Just 10 more seconds if you don't mind. Yeah, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We agree with opening opposition when they come up and say that Messi has been projected as a very loyal player to FC Barcelona. We agree that this is an actor debate. I mean, there is no contention on that. Wherein we disagree is that we do not have a burden to prove that he should absolutely hold on and not leave Barcelona per se, because ultimately this motion doesn't frame this particular debate either in sense of an urgency or in sense of a long-term repercussion. But irrespective of that, my impacts are going to be reflecting both short-term and long-term implication of what happens when Messi leaves Barcelona. Further characterize. So here's how I'm going to structure my speech. There's going to be a further characterization on what happens as a loss of image and what signaling effect happens. Secondly, there will be specific impacts which will significantly hamper how Messi performs as a sports person and how his career is going to be. Thirdly, few integrated rebuttals. Let's understand what the characterization in this particular debate should be. Argentina already lost 2014 World Cup against Germany, and the blame was put on Messi because he was one of the most important players in that particular team. There have been further criticism for him to not represent himself in the national team matches and developing that particular team and focusing more on Barcelona than Argentinian team at this particular point, even though he's one of the most important players in the Latin American continent. There have been recent losses of Barcelona in multiple European leagues, which have also been put on Messi, as he is one of the only important players of FC Barcelona at this particular point. At this point, if Messi chooses to leave, this is basically signaling that he is ditching FC Barcelona at the time when club is losing, especially when he's being criticized for not standing up for Latin America or Argentinian team itself. This basically means there's going to be further tarnishing of his image. Even though he's considered to be a loyal player, he's not going to be considered as a loyal player anymore, simply because he will be tagged as a person who abandons a ship, especially when that particular ship is sinking. A sports player has 3 key interests, and this is something which is a principal level argument you need to take into consideration. First is the idea brings in 2 specific impacts. First is money. Second is post-retirement career prospects. When Messi chooses to leave, he's going to be called as a person who abandoned Barcelona after already abandoning Argentina. This diminishes his popular opinion in countries like Spain, Argentina, and across the world. There are further impacts to that. First of all, it invites two specific court cases against Lionel Messi. First is with respect to the sports arbitration for rescinding a contract which was already going to be rescinded after a year, wherein since he's leaving in currently, it's going to be flagged as abrupt and without any sort of warning for Barcelona. And when Barcelona is seeing massive investment losses due to crisis in sports industry, due to lack of ticket revenues, etc., due to COVID-19 crisis, Barcelona managers would be more than willing to take money from Messi as per the contract for violating that contract, which is millions of dollars. And this entire case is going to be gone to the Sports Arbitration Center, wherein Messi won't be able to protect himself because FC Barcelona, having large pool of money, will always be able to afford better arbitrators and lawyers in comparison to himself. And Barcelona is going to take this money to cut the losses and initiate a transition wherein they're able to buy a replacement of Messi at this particular point now that Messi has chosen to abandon FC Barcelona. All of this can be avoided if he chooses to leave as a free agent post the contract nullification, and by ensuring that the debt of Barcelona has been paid by performing a bit better than he has been performing in the past few matches. And Barcelona is given an opportunity to run into a smooth transition wherein Barcelona is also able to buy a replacement player. Second case is with respect to the tax fraud. He has been already accused of tax fraud in Spain. However, the prosecutors abandoned that particular case or prescribed a less harsher punishment simply because of the popular opinion Messi has in in Spain itself. At this point, when there has been a lack of popular opinion and too much criticism, you're just basically giving incentives for prosecutors to go ahead and reinvestigate and reopen this particular case, press fresh charges, which can even lead to 4 years prison as per the Spanish law. That's at this point, when Messi chooses to leave a sinking ship, he's basically destroying his career by inviting a literal tax fraud case and a sports arbitration case. Second thing is related to, and there is going to be the integrated rebuttal here, is with related to brand endorsement and how with respect to whether other clubs are going to buy. It must be noted that Messi is not going to go on a small club simply because he has been treated as a legend across the footballing circuit. So that possibility is out. This golden boy of Barcelona, as O has already framed, will be shown as a disloyal player and also as an arbitrary person. And this is going to reflect on future contract which he can get, and hence he has been and what he has been earning from Barcelona. That is to say, he might be earning way lesser than he has been earning in Barcelona with way lesser respect that he was gaining in Barcelona at this particular point, which will affect his brand endorsement as well, because brand endorsers are not going to go ahead and accept any particular sports player who has been particularly criticized for being an abandoner, because that also affects their brand image as well. Leaving the club now and not having the same treatment from the club and management which he transitions into will gradually make him unhappy. And since this is an actor debate, Messi being unhappy in itself is a great impact to be taken into consideration. It must be understood that Francesco Totti retired from AS Roma, and he also was considered differently from other players for not abandoning, and that was because he chose to be loyal. But at this point, Messi is not being loyal at all. But let's talk about post-retirement prospects. It must be understood that this particular decision, even if he leaves after a year, is going to be impulsive in nature because it questions loyalty of that particular person. He has no career prospect in Argentina for being a manager or a coach, simply because he abandoned Argentina at the very first place. And even if Argentinian national team appoints him as a coach after his retirement, the payment is going to be less. So the only possible future Messi at this particular point has to be a manager in a good sports club in Europe. And in that particular regard, when he is tagged as an impulsive and arbitrary manager, that in itself affects his prospects as well. And this further affects his prospects of being coach in Barcelona itself and being a key player in Barcelona, which is a club which raised him right from the beginning and can be a potential retiring spot for him and for post-retirement career prospect for him. At this point, because of this decision, Messi is literally destroying his career, inviting a prison sentence, and inviting a huge penalty on himself through sports arbitration, and further damaging his own career with respect to money endorsement and money he gets from other clubs. And that is the important weighing in this particular debate we're extremely proud to propose.
I thank that speaker for their fine speech and would now like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition Here.
Can I check if everyone can hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Can I request if any POIs, just unmute yourself to just ask a POI. That might be a lot easier for me. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. I want to talk about 3 things in this speech. First, I want to talk about Messi's reputation and legacy. Second, I want to talk about Messi's sporting career. And lastly, I want to talk about why, even if he's not successful in leaving, despite his intention, the reforms within that club will actually bring some good within Messi. So first, with regard to his reputation and legacy. So OG's main contention is that if you stay, basically Messi will be seen as an opportunist, leaving at a point of time where the club is actually not at its best and people will think that he's disloyal. First, I want to contend this because, as we have already proven, Messi has stayed with Barcelona since he was an amateur. Oftentimes, individuals have seen him through the worst of Barcelona, and therefore the legacy he leaves behind is one not as a disloyalist, but someone who has stayed true and true. So I don't think it's true to begin with. But second, I think this argument is contingent on them proving that Messi at some point is able to bring Barcelona out to the glory days again. But there are 3 reasons why this will not happen. The first is that Messi is already in odds with the coach, as Hui tells you, right? And he's very vocal about it. And therefore, it's quite unlikely that Messi will feature very, very strongly on the club lineup anymore. Second, even if he tries, given the recent plays such as the 8-2 defeat of Barcelona against Bayern Munich, I think that already shows that the club has so much cracks that it's quite impossible. But third, because of the mismanagement of the club presently, they are too focused on internal politics. They are unable to perform on the international stage. So given that that's the case, and given that the entire case is hung on Messi being able to bring the club out of victory, and since I've proven to you that Messi is unable to, what therefore is the harm? And I want to use opening government's words against them. They said, at the point where Argentina failed in winning the World Cup, the entire world placed that blame on Messi. Precisely because of that, because Messi is the golden boy and key player in Barcelona now, if he's unable to bring the club up to success, individuals place blame on Messi because he's an important and crucial figure. Therefore, the harm that they have to contend with is a harm of individuals placing a lot of blame on Messi. And I think the benefit on our side, as what Hui tells you, is that you can prove yourself because you are able to leave other clubs, and there are incentives for other clubs to take you in because of the increased experience, you have the tactical knowledge you have as well. And that means that you have the ability to succeed outside. Moreover, even if we accept that Messi takes a hit on his reputation, that's fine because of 2 reasons. The first is that presently, individuals within Barcelona fans themselves have already been very dissatisfied with the state of Barcelona presently. And therefore, people will understand the move by Messi regardless. But second, even if there is this idea of disloyalty, at worst, this sense of disloyalty is limited to fans of Barcelona. But the trade-off that we get on our side is that now Messi can prove himself outside of Spain and finally rival Ronaldo for the title of greatest player of all time. Because the problem here is that presently individuals don't see Messi as a very good player because they only think that Messi has proven himself in Spain. However, at the point when you move out, firstly, you also increase your fan base, and you need to understand that football and soccer is very, very strange sport where people support the teams they play irrespective of the players on the field. And therefore, they support the players only because they are playing for their own club. And therefore, it's important for you, especially when you're old and retiring, to increase the exposure of fans you get, not just be limited to a celebrity in the area of Spain, but also in areas like America or in the English Premier League, for example. So that is the benefit we get on our side in terms of cementing our legacy, because you get more fans in and of itself. Before I move on to my second point, are there any POIs, preferably from closing? Okay, moving on to my second point, therefore. Why in terms of the sporting career? So we set up this present problem. I don't think opening of government did contend with this, which is that there are 2 problems Messi faces right now. First, he's not very valued, and second, that there's a bad team right now that is extremely fractured. So what changes in terms of his sporting career on our side of the house? First, he becomes way more valued as a player. And this is important, irrespective of whether he wins or not, because especially when you are a sportsman, being able to play the game as you want to is something that's extremely important to you. And this is something that changes on our side, because finally you are valued more as a player, but you can also play your own style, which allows you to perform much better. Furthermore, we contend that especially when we are talking about sporting career, it's oftentimes extremely short-lived. And therefore, opening government's case about how we can wait till his contract ends, etc., is not a case that you can actually contend with, because ultimately there is a lifespan that we can talk about in this debate, and we need to do this now urgently to ensure that he still has the physical ability to do that. The last thing I want to deal with is this clear claim from opening government about this idea of tax fraud and cases. I think all of these arguments are contingent on the idea of reputation, and so long as we're in the point of reputation, I don't think I need to deal with these points. Sure.
If it's true that Messi is genuinely such a fantastic player, and given that he's already made the threat to leave, why won't Barcelona try to resolve their disagreement with him now if he agrees to stay on that condition?
Okay, I'm now moving on to my last point, which will deal perfectly with that. So on our side of the house, we think that Messi signaling his intention to leave and threatening to leave is something that will force two main reforms of Barcelona that will not happen on your side. First, now Barcelona will stop talking about the internal politics, but start realizing his importance, especially when the Gulf bench recognizes that Messi is actually an important key figure within the play of Barcelona. We think what happens is that the internal fractures will now heal and cement itself, at the very least temporarily, to retain Messi. So we think that this will look like things like maybe replacing the head coach, because there's a figure that Messi is not on good terms with, or buying players like Neymar, who he actually requested to get, but Barcelona has not acquiesced with this request. But second, and more importantly, because of how important Messi is as a figure, his clout allows the fans to start pressuring Barcelona to improve the way and the treatment of Messi as well. This also looks like increasing player salaries, which is something that opening government wants to talk about, or just ensuring that he has a lot more game time or plays in tactics that features him much more prominently, that allows him to cement his legacy. So even if he threatens to leave but is unable to and is forced to stay in Barcelona in the long run, we think that the threat of wanting to leave is something that forces these reforms and improves the conditions he plays in. And for all those reasons, I'm proud to oppose.
I thank that speaker for that fine speech, and that concludes the top half of this debate. I'd now like to invite the member of government. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I'll take POIs over the chat. One point of clarification before I get into our extension. Let's be very clear. OO's case in this debate cannot be about how you threaten to leave Barcelona and therefore change it, because that clashes with literally everything else that they told us about how Messi is going to be benched because he's apparently because of the disagreement, or all that stuff about how he should move international. Their case has to be about why you should leave Barcelona, not about like the process of leaving it and why it's beneficial when you have to stay. Our proposition is the only side in this debate which can stand for Messi engaging in these talks, because this debate doesn't exclusively happen in like the 1 year of before this contract. At any point saying, to keep me, you have to make these changes, and this sort of influence over a club's functioning is influence he will only have in Barcelona and not over any other club that he joins in the future. Our extension then, closing government brings to you a critical piece of context that no other team in this debate has discussed so far. The La Liga is a league which is specifically tied to community incredibly deeply. We have seen in the past that there is massive violence in sports within sports events in the La Liga. We have seen that there's incredible household influence, but more importantly, it's often incredibly politicized. Barcelona is associated with its location in Catalonia. Real Madrid is often associated with the rest of Spain. This is why loyalty matters, even when it comes to imagery, and it's not based on everything OO would like to pretend, like your actual performance within that team, or like whether Barcelona is succeeding or not. This is fixed. Your loyalty is determined by whether you stick to your cultural community by fighting for a club that you have fought for in the past, regardless of how it's doing. That's a critical piece of context that we bring. Here's what that means for the debate. Firstly, in the instance that Messi leaves Barcelona and the team takes a significant hit, much worse than its already downward slope right now. Here are two things that are likely to happen. Firstly, look, Catalonia isn't like leaving Spain successfully in either case, but Catalonia's welfare is still in question when it comes to how it engages with the rest of Spain. Barcelona and Messi, like icons from Catalonia, from Barcelona, are incredibly important within popular culture in making making Catalonia seem a palatable part of Spain overall. Which means that if Messi leaves, he hurts people that he has demonstrated in the past that he cares about by hurting people's general overall opinion of this region. For instance, we've seen like him like fundraise immensely for for Spain, specifically during COVID-19, etc. It also hurts his reputation immensely because this becomes incredibly heated, because the marginal impact on how Catalonia is seen and the massive impact on how Catalonian fans perceive him for defecting to another team from the rest of Spain will be huge on his public reputation and how he's hired in the future. But secondly, it has a huge impact on community-owned sports within Spain. Notice that Messi is one of the few players within Spain who's been grown by youth leagues and has stuck by the team that grew him in the beginning, right? Some teams in Spain are primarily like publicly traded and are owned by communities like Barcelona, while most of them are either immensely centralized over like one or two leaders, or like have a major private investor. What happens when Messi leaves Barcelona and more likely than not defects to a privately owned team? We think this is a huge hit for community-owned sports overall, because one of the few previously successful community-owned teams will take a massive hit. As a result of this, general sports access, which is benefited by the existence of community-owned teams, so things like the reduction in ticket prices that occurs as a result of community-owned teams, which benefit all athletes by creating greater fan bases, are lost and hurt specifically Messi as well, because what this means for his public image is he's seen not only as someone who hurt the community that invested within Barcelona, also hurted just general athleticism and hurted community ownership within sport all over Spain, and hurt Catalonia, as a result of which he has significant monetary losses as well in terms of losing things like ad contracts, which rely on him being a well-liked public figure. What's likely to happen when he leaves Barcelona, regardless of like whether the team does well or not, is that he joins another team. Here's why that's likely to go badly for him. Firstly, it's likely to just be a bad deal, right? Because most teams in Spain, regardless of how well they're doing right now, are just not as rich or as successful as Barcelona has been historically. So they're likely to not offer him as significant monetary benefits. But secondly, he is likely to be less successful within that team because you have to establish team dynamics from scratch. You need to re-establish yourself. OO says that it's going to be harder for him to perform well right now because he's aging, etc. Right? When you move to a new team, you need to re-establish yourself from scratch as someone who is important to that team. He's already seen as someone who is important to Barcelona. We don't want him to lose that influence. But if he switches, the only teams that are likely to offer him things like enough money or enough of a pre-existing talent pool are likely to be other major teams like right now. So teams like Real Madrid, right? Which would be seen as a huge cultural betrayal, because he essentially defects from like Barcelona and like being and representing Catalonia athletically to a completely different region, which hurts him massively as a public figure and genuinely has the ability to ruin his future public career. But also it means that in the new team that he joins, he will have less influence in being able to cause change, right? So opening opposition agrees that Messi is currently influential enough within Barcelona that he would be able to cause internal change and improve the general situation of the team, right? He loses that ability when he switches to a completely new team where he isn't seen as that important and the team has functioned for a very long time without him as well. All teams are going to have a period where their management is bad. The question is, what can Messi do about it, and can he do anything about it if he switches to a new team? We don't think so. But thirdly, the thing to question is, if Messi leaves and Barcelona isn't hurt that much, in the likelihood that maybe the management changes when he leaves because it's shocked enough and because community members force it to happen, or because they get new youth league members, or because Messi might be getting worse, right? In all those cases, he is seen as unimportant and loses the legacy he has already developed within as a player of Barcelona. Because when he leaves and the team continues to be roughly at the same level it was before, his legacy is erased in a way that is immensely damaging. The third thing is, we are also going to be a team that engages within the 1 year when his contract continues to exist, right? What we think is likely to happen if Messi at all threatens to leave the team and his threat is denied, and what's likely to happen is there are going to be massively public court trials. He's going to lose a lot of money in the process. He's going to have a lot of journalistic disagreement about like his general value to the team and whether he's just a good team player. But also, more importantly, he's going to be hurt when he's forced to stay on the team. Team dynamics are damaged massively. He might actually be forced to sit out at this point, and he's and like fans and team members don't trust him, aren't willing to buy his athletic gear to the same extent anymore, all of that stuff. Because we're the only team that protects Messi's interests in the rest of sport, brings in essential context about Barcelona specifically, and considers the context of what happens if the team isn't heard. We're proud to be on CG.
I thank that speaker for their kind speech and would now like to invite the member of opposition. Here.
Yep, hi. Can I check? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, great. Sorry, give me a moment. Starting in 3, 2, 1. The first thing I want to do is set the context for this debate. Opening government said that it's okay to leave next year. That's just an unrealistic context because of two reasons. One, if he tries to leave now, he's going to have to either find a club to pay 700 million euros for him, which is 3 times the previous world transfer record. Or second, he's going to be banned for a year without salary. That's the agreement that was struck with La Liga. So it cannot be that he's going to leave this year. That the debate is about whether he leaves now. It has to be about when his contract expires. Does he sign a new contract or does he choose to leave the club? To that degree, let's continue on government bench. The core argument you get for opening is this idea of image. I have a multitude of reasons why this is untrue. The first is that even the fans that they are concerned about are also very much anti-Bartomeu. And the reason, because of the degree of losses that they've had, the 8-2 loss against Bayern being the catalyst, which creates a lot of anger against the way the club is managed, and the fact that other players like Piqué chose to focus attention on the higher echelons of the club in saying, that's the problem here, and we need to deal with them. So there's a lot of sympathy for Messi, and there's a widespread belief in the community that the club and the team have been letting Messi down rather than the other way around. Second, many players have actually left Barcelona and still are widely supported. Players like Xavi, Iniesta, Guardiola, who came back as manager. But there are two important things to note. The first is that Messi has always said he'll leave someday. The point is, and this deals with closing, he also promised, and that's something we can defend, that he wouldn't leave to another Spanish club, which means the likelihood coming to defeat Barcelona is incredibly low because it depends on the draw amongst so many clubs across Europe, as opposed to a league format where he'll definitely come back. That means the extent to which he can hurt Barcelona directly and therefore create this kind of anger is limited. Second, note that when he said that he was going to leave Barcelona, club legends like Puyol supported him, which means that the fans are being given a direction to believe that it's okay for him to leave. But third, note that people are always going to be angry in the short term, but in the long term, when they don't ever see someone as great as Messi again because he truly is a wizard, it's likely that they're always going to have that kind of rose-tinted lenses in years to come. They said it's going to be, the problem is impulsive. I think if he holds this stance, he's not going to appear impulsive. But also, like, this Argentina thing is just factually untrue, right? There's a general pity that he didn't make it with Argentina rather than believing that he's uniquely at fault. And the reason for this is how close he came and how hard he tried within those World Cups. I don't think it's fair. I just think that this claim is anti-football. Then they said there's a tax issue. I promise no one cares. And the reason for that is that no footballer has ever been punished for taxes in Spain. There's no good reason this would start now. They didn't provide a delta as to why this would. Finally, this idea of branding, 3 responses. 1, the reality is that the degree of attention that he gets is still so important that it's likely that he'll still get a lot of money. 2, the likelihood that this just leaving a club is just not remotely similar to things like racism that could possibly get you cancelled. But the reality is, sadly, football just doesn't really care about individuals' political views. The fact is that anti-vaxxers like Lovren, Bolsonaro supporters like Alisson are still widely popular because they focus on their football and ignore everything else. But finally, they didn't explain why the relationship with Barcelona is uniquely important to Messi. The rest of the world could love him. He could personally get medals. Those seem like good things to me. The closing government wanted to talk about Catalonia. Look, Messi is judiciously apolitical. Even during the Catalonia protest, while other people who were actually native Catalonian were speaking, he kept quiet because he just doesn't want to be involved in these things. So there's no difference in terms of the political framing. But also, like, he already promised he wouldn't move within Spain, so I don't think it's an issue. Finally, this thing about the community around teams. The reality is that Barcelona is so commercialized and it actually limits its voting members quite significantly instead of other clubs that are uniquely that are actually completely fan-based. I just don't think this is a very significant issue. Substantive. I'm going to prove first why we get glory from Messi and why he would want that. I want to note first why this matters, and there's 2 reasons. 1, football is a fundamentally emotional game. I don't have like words to describe this, but if you look at his heartbreak in the last few years when they've repeatedly lost the semis of the Champions League in embarrassing fashion, you will see how painful he is. He looks like a broken man in some of the documentaries. And I think that's important to note that he wants to avoid this heartbreak. But second, his reputation and legacy is important because when you reach that level of success, the question is not whether you are good. The question is whether you are the best. It's a Pelé versus Maradona battle that you want to resolve in your favor. The ego that pushes you to this stage means that you cannot accept anything less. The problem is that Messi is in a position where his legacy is both secure and insecure. We already think he's one of the greats, but he's unfortunate enough to come around at a time when Ronaldo is also there making a good claim to be the GOAT. And so the question is therefore how he can prove that he is the best, or at least stake his claim for the discussion in many, many years to come. But the last important thing to note is there's no time to wait for rebuilding because his age is one at the point that it's so old, he's not going to get another big contract. If the moment he signs a contract, no one will ever pay a transfer fee to sign him again. So this is a career-defining decision. Why can't he get this ever at Barcelona? And this is where I'm going to up the stakes for ourselves. Because the reality is that Barcelona does have an election in a year's time. It is possible that some degree of the club mismanagement is going to be gone. Why is it structurally the case that Barcelona is absolutely screwed in the next 5 to 10 years regardless? The first thing to note is that in the status quo is so bad that after they lost 8-2 to Bayern, pundits said that only 4 or 5 players in that team are actually good enough to play for Barcelona. The second thing to note is that all the options to be Barcelona's coach are honestly not experienced enough. Ronald Koeman, the current coach, has no European pedigree, and the last time we saw him in club football, he was getting sacked by Everton. I mean, fucking Everton. But second, the reality is that the alternative Xavi that is being proposed by the new coalition is equally inexperienced. He has never even managed in Europe before. So either way, this is a massive gamble. Even if Messi wants to take the gamble, the club as a whole cannot rebuild in time for 3 reasons. 1, the uncertain managerial situation dissuades top players to move to Barcelona. 2, the problem for Barcelona now is that they have a lot of players like Suarez, like Busquets, and Vidal on very, very high wages. In a COVID context where clubs don't know where their money is going to come from, they can't move these wages on, which means that they're stuck with these players who don't work, but they're uncertain as to whether they can move them on and therefore have money to sign new players, which means that they're stuck. But third, the market is more competitive than ever, which means that the days of players moving to Barcelona for glory are just over because alternatives like Bayern, City, Liverpool exist that mean that Barcelona is not going to be able to have a stranglehold over the top players. That means that we give you structural reasons why even if we agree that the board might change, the problems for him are stuck. What is the comparative? The comparative is actually City's deal that they offer him, which is a 3+3 deal. You play 3 years in England, you go to New York City, you play 3 more years with equal money. There are a few reasons why this is important. 1, there's a high chance to win because he's going to reunite with Guardiola, his previous manager. And that deals with the idea of re-establishing yourself because Guardiola loves Messi. They have a close personal bond, and that means that he's likely to fuel Messi again and again because he's also the GOAT. But here's why it's beneficial. You prove your worth to a new fan base in the most watched league in the world. That means that no one is ever going to be able to doubt you again because they can see your magic on the TV screens week in, week out, which does not exist for you in Spain. But finally, you remove the doubts that only Spain has been good for you, right? The reality is that the trope that he can't do it in a cold, wet Tuesday night in Stoke is going to be removed and he proves himself in a new league and therefore cements his status. But 4, when he moves to the MLS, he has the ability to catapult this league to the next level. That's critically important because he's therefore able to leave a lasting legacy of bringing football to the richest country in the world, the most prosperous and commercialized league country in the world. And that therefore cements his global reputation as someone who made it everywhere. And that's incredibly important to someone who pushed so hard for excellence as him. Proud to oppose.
I thank that speaker for that fine speech and would now like to invite the government whip to conclude the case inside government. Hear, hear.